Welcome to this new podcast episode. Today I'm talking to Drea Burbank. Hi, Drea.
Hi.
You currently, where are you now?
I'm in the Colombian Amazon. And I'm deep in the jungle, and apparently there's some power tools running in the background, so I apologize.
I don't hear them.
Okay.
An easy question would be how do you get there? But I think that's going to be a long story then.
I'm
Um,
just gonna say planes, trains, and automobiles. So it's kind of like a hop, skip, jump. You ask your friend, and then you're on the back of a truck, and by the time you get there, yeah, it's a journey.
it is a journey.
Yeah.
Um, what I got. Okay, let's dive first in what you do now. What you're doing here, where you are now, right? So Savimbo, um, you sell credits for the farmers to plant trees. If that's the short version, I believe.
The short version would be we stop deforestation and we sell 4 to 6 climate products. So the climate products that we sell are carbon, biodiversity, water credits, ecotourism, and agrobiodiversity crops. And depending on the area, it's a little bit like a mosaic, like who can sell what. But those are our services that we sell, and that's how we do it.
And that means that you sell credits to companies who are still polluting.
It depends on the company. Some companies are pro-social and like nature positive, and they don't have much of an impact, but they have, like a lot of tech companies, they have a low operating margin. So there's a lot of disposable cash. And some of those guys are, into tech for good and blah, blah, blah. So foundations can buy them as an outcome metric, which does reduce some of the intermediary costs because they might not need certification. Our biodiversity credits can't be offset. Carbon credits can, we're selective about the use case.
And to me, I always have with these credits parts, I'm not sure. But the main thing is that what I've read from the website is that you help these farmers to make a living from making a change.
Um, we help them get independent. So just a minute, I have to ask my staff to get the noise to stop. I'm so sorry.
Yeah, no, don't
Um,
worry.
quita el ruido. Yo tengo entrevista, estamos recordando y hay mucho ruido atrás. Yeah. Bueno, okay. Uh, you have to be really like firm with the hammering guys. They love hammering, and it's like they're like, "What? I can't hammer?" And I'm like, "No, you can't hammer for like a whole 20 minutes." And they're like, "But I was hammering." Like this crazy white woman. Okay, yeah, let me tell you. Actually, that pretty much does sum up what we're doing here in the jungle because people are like, I was just hammering and that's what I do. Like I hammer, I cut down trees. Why are you getting in my way? And you're just like, okay, just like stop, think. There's an alternative. You can get paid to do something else. Maybe you could get paid to play an instrument. And they're like, so then they're like, well, how do I play an instrument? And you're like, okay, it's not so bad. There's like a few notes. Here's instrument playing. And the next thing you know, they're jamming happily away on a band and it's good. Yeah, that's what we do. That's a metaphor for what we do. In reality, we are really good at training technology on the ground in small little pods. We started out as a consulting agency teaching a lot of small startups basically how to run their business. And so we're used to teaching people tech skills in kind of a fluid way that's more of an apprenticeship model. And what we were able to do was teach the small farmers and like the kids at the small farmers how to run emerging technologies pretty fluidly. So they were like they were pig farming and then coding on Google Earth Engine in about 6 months. And so that transition to like, I can do my own topography, I can do this, I can build a website, all that stuff happened really fast for them. And as a result, it kept the operating costs low, and that allows us to work with a group of people that have a higher transaction cost. Is that making sense?
Yeah, it does. And I think um, the way I understood it, so what is it? Why is deforestation happening in Amazon? I have a feeling what I've learned, but I want to learn from you. What is it that you think is deforestation?
Primary driver of deforestation is 1 billion people that live in tropical forests around the world. It doesn't even matter if it's Amazon or Congo, it's the same behaviors. And they're not paid for conservation. There's no money hitting the ground to those people for conservation. The carbon market was incredibly inequitable, like horrifically inequitable. Like the entire 1 billion people that actually lived in the forest and should have and needed the financial incentive to conserve because they are the ones that do the logging were excluded from the carbon market from day one. They either didn't have land rights, or they didn't have a big enough land plot, or they didn't have enough money to pay off their $80,000 and wait 3 years to have a project. In many cases, there was like corrupt nation, like landowners. Like I talked to a landowner who had gotten a deal from the government for a large petroleum contract that he closed, and he had like 50,000 hectares, and it was just given to him as a back room, like, here, thanks for closing this. And he had a better shot of getting his carbon project up and running than my 250 small farmers that had been here for 5,000 years. So it was just really brutal, and that's why the outcomes were so bad, because the wrong people got paid. Like the person I talked to doesn't even live here. He lives in Canada. And I asked him what Indigenous people are on your land, and he says, there's no Indigenous people there. I was like, are you kidding me? Like primary forest in the Amazon, of course there's an Indigenous peoples there. He just didn't even know because he'd never been there.
Yeah, so it's still the same thing, right? It's still the Western world exploiting the poor people.
Well, which is why it's so funny that it didn't work, because you can't save a planet with the same behavior. Like, what do they say? Insanity is doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. And I think that is what is so cool about the carbon markets is we tried to do this colonialism thing with the carbon markets, and it didn't work at all. And it was so obvious so quickly. And, with the last round of colonialism, it was like 200 years of extraction. And oh my God, we ruined the planet. But like, it took a long time. And this time it was like we were actually trying to reach an outcome that was better. And so it was more obvious that that behavior didn't work. And so Savimbo is about how to save a planet. It's like, it's not let's save the planet, it's how to save a planet, because inequity is part of the reason we're in this mess in the first place.
And the Savimbo project company came from other work that you did, if I understand it correctly.
Yeah, now this is where it gets crazy. Everybody likes the result and nobody likes the backstory where it came from. So
well, I do.
Okay, well, I'll tell you the short version. So I grew up off the grid in central Idaho in a fundamentalist religious commune. 9 years fighting forest fires with ex-convicts and gang members and paramilitary or previous military. And then I went to med school, finished med school, and was like, this is not working for me. And ended up consulting for 10 years in high tech and hard science. By then, I discovered that my IQ was undesirably high. And
Undesirably high.
Undesirably high. In other words, talk too fast, make logical leaps, difficult to employ, all the side effects of.
But undesirable for you or the environment, for other
the
people?
Entire world. Like
Right.
the evidence is that people with high IQ are as difficult to employ as people with the equivalently low IQ. So I'm as unemployable as a Down syndrome person, which isn't as bad as it could be, but it's not great. So I need workplace accommodations basically to fit into a workplace. And so I started getting other people like me who were class restricted. In other words, highly intelligent, but were post-incarcerated because they grew up in the ghetto in Miami, or they had a bad childhood because their parents were heroin addicts or whatever. And so really talented people, but they didn't have all the markers of like societal approval. So they couldn't go to McKinsey. We called ourselves the anti-McKinsey. And we banded together and we ended up being about 300 people in 15 countries. And we specialized at the intersection of emerging technology, hard science, and intractable problems. So like we used a machine learning app to solve homelessness donations, things like that. It was a lot of fun. And so we've been running for about 10 years, and we had all our own little rules for how to get geniuses to work together, because it's like herding cats. We're all like horrifically idiosyncratic. And then we figured out like these funny little like workplace mechanisms. But we ran smack dab into this group of Colombian medicine doctors, and they'd been doing psychedelics for like 5,000 years. So they were ridiculously intelligent. And we recognized it right away, but they had a totally opposite, like mirrored worldview. Their paradigms were totally different. And we were like fascinated. We were like, we want to work with you. We don't know what you're doing, but it's interesting.
That was the start.
That's how Savimbo started. And then my group is really damn pro-social. I will give them that. Like, pro-social is one of the attributes of high IQ. And so we kind of like we gave them like a push. In other words, like they were on a bicycle and we kind of got them started. So a lot of the guys consulted for free or lower rate. And then after that, they took over down here and the company's been running, we're about 90% local staff now.
I'm also curious. So you were in this group of people, putting down wildfires, right?
Yeah.
For 9 years.
Yeah.
And then you decide to go to medicine school. But why? That sounds kind of like different.
Yeah, I was like one of the only women in many of my districts. So the physical requirements to be a firefighter were really high. And because of my off-grid childhood, I developed a lean muscle mass, which was kind of rare for women in the US. So I could do 7 pull-ups and I was able to keep up with the guys to a certain extent. But most of the guys I was working with were about like 6'2", 6'5", and like 200 pounds. And I was like, 130, 150 and 5'4". So the toll on my large joints to do the same amount of work, just from a physics perspective, was pretty high. The packs they were designed for male hips, and I started to get lower back pain from them. So stuff like that. And I just realized, like any athlete, like I'd had a good run, but it was time to hang up the hat on the endurance sports. I kept climbing, and I think that athleticism has served me really well in this job in the Amazon because I'll say honestly, I think these guys are the fittest people I've ever met, bar none. Like we had a professional trail runner or a semi-pro trail runner and a semi-pro rugby player come down here, and they were both crying at the end of the first couple of days. They're like, "It's so hard." I was like, "Yeah, it is. It really is."
And on the other side, you also are into yoga, for example.
Yeah, so after firefighting, you get I think if you're a like lifetime athlete, you need something. And so I went on what I call a yoga bender. During COVID, I put on some weight and I wanted to see if I could take it off. And we did a thing with I did yoga twice a day, Bikram yoga with 90 minutes twice a day for 6 months. And then I filmed like how my body changed over the 6 months. So I've got 0, 3, and 6 month videos. And I've been lazy and I haven't put out all the videos, but I wanted to show doctors like how yoga changes the body, because doctors are pretty good at assessing musculoskeletal, or some of them are. And I thought if they could just see like a really intense, because my body, like I was like 50 pounds overweight and I've got an endomorph, so I can drop it really quick. So I could show them like visually what the yoga was doing. But
And how does that help you in your today's work?
well, I mean, okay, so one of the things that we do is we go to Indigenous groups and we help get them on board with tech and stuff. And so I have a kind of like a small traveling cohort of people that go from one side to the other. If you're physically unfit, it's very hard for them to respect you. And hiking in the Amazon is a full body like endeavor, like and you don't want to hurt yourself. Like it's dangerous. It's dangerous as hell. It's very, very bad. And so core strength that you get from yoga and the balance you get from yoga is probably one of the better training mechanisms. If you're doing a hardcore kind of yoga, like Bikram or Ashtanga, the second person that I brought on was an Ashtanga yogi. And so your body's a little bit more flexible. If you fall, you fall. You can absorb it a little bit better, and then your endurance is different.
And what do the 5 doctors that you saw in the beginning from those local people, what do you think about this whole process that you went through?
This was their idea. I mean, this was the consult. They were like, okay, we want a business. We don't like charities. We're not a charity case, and charities don't work, and they take all the money. They'd had a number of bad experiences with NGOs. And then they were like, we want a for-profit business because we wanted to compete with mining, logging, petroleum, and narco trafficking, which were the only businesses on the ground here. So they're like, we want a green economy. And then they're like, we want funding with no strings attached. So, and they were like, go, Drea, make this happen. And and that's how it started, but it's actually been about a year and a half of co-development. So, and I love like they're great, like balancing a budget. They're amazing. Like there's a bunch of stuff that they're just really good at. And so it's been a lot of fun to see what they're good at, what I'm good at, and then work together. And we have our fights. Like we had a big fight about trigonometry of all things. We were doing topography, and then the GIS error, because I knew it was like a 30-foot error on the GIS. So I was like working out how to make a geocode accurate with a 30-foot error because we can't afford really good GPS. And they were like, oh, we'll just hang a string and we'll do this. And I was like, no, we're going to do this with trigonometry. And they're like, what? What is this trigonometry thing you speak of, woman? We've been using strings to build houses for 200 years. Like, so we have our fights, but they're more entertaining than.
Well, maybe afterwards.
They're funny in retrospect. Yeah, but it's
Yeah.
like a lot of times when we do disagree, it's more about higher education because they haven't had education in terms, and it hasn't necessarily been a bad thing. As somebody who went through the education system with a like I said, an undesirably high IQ, I think that it can be like horrific what it does to the brain.
Mm.
Like how it restricts your thinking and how it teaches you to be dependent on other people and regurgitating information and all this stuff. So I'm not necessarily saying it's a bad thing, but there are some things that you get, like advanced math and science and stuff, that it's hard to convince somebody you're valuable because they're intangible.
Mm. Yeah. I was just having a family conversation with the family about that this weekend. So when do you use this anyway? I don't like that. Younger people that were studying still in school. So, um, I so I understand these farmers, they change their way of living, right? They change the living style because of the money that they get to preserve the Amazon.
Yeah.
And but what I've understood, for example, with in Amazon is there's two big reasons why we are three reasons why we are cutting down trees. One is we have these palm oil plantage where we put up new trees and we drive these people out of their original neighborhood and they have to work there because they don't have any original way of living anymore. The other one is um, uh, soy, which is more in South America, where we have these soy plants and they would be shipped to, for example, the Netherlands, where I live, for the cows to eat. And there's cattle, right? So there's a lot of the increase of the number of cattle because we eat more meat. That's also deforestation. But that's not something you just mentioned before. How do you see that?
Well, it depends on where you're at. So we work on the border of deforestation. So there's two sides to it, right? One side is pristine primary forest, and the other side is deforested. So I'll go through those one by one. Okay, so what we do to conserve a primary forest is different than what we do to optimize a deforested area. You can like improve a deforested area, improve the logging, the cattle. There's lots of things you can do to make it more efficient so they don't need to keep deforesting. Most of the farming on the border of the forest is silly. Like you cut down the trees and the land is not that, it doesn't have a lot of topsoil. So it's not fertile. It's fertile after for like 3 years and then it's just like dead. And then they just go cut down some more trees or slash and burn. So what you can do is you can totally stop that cycle by just teaching them how to do nitrogen fixing with biochar and agroforestry. There's a tree here called Inga that you can plant in rows and it will fix coffee and cocoa rot and increase your yield by 10 times and blah, blah, blah. So these aren't complicated. For cattle, it's really, people are used to it. It's more of like a habit. Like we do cattle, that's what we do. But that doesn't add up. Like here, a cow on a 1 hectare produces a cow after 3 years that sells for $12. I can pay them $12 per hectare per year for carbon.
Okay,
Sorry,
I lost you.
I can pay them three
Yeah,
times more.
yeah.
Yeah, so that's cattle. For soy, it's just incredibly stupid to be shipping. I mean, to be shipping. Think of it. It just like on every level. It's so stupid. You're cutting down a forest that is literally one of the tent poles for our planet. You're emitting as you go across the ocean, across the canal that's about to be like impossible to use. Like the Panama Canal is going down. We're not going to have it available, and that's going to take care of the soy problem right there. But then you're shipping it not for humans, you're shipping it for livestock so that humans can eat meat, which is killing them in North America. Like across the board, like here people live to about 90, 95, sometimes 120 with no dementia. Like the amount of meat people consume in the US and what it does to their veins and then their brains is like, you know, so there's this collective insanity on this stuff. For the palm oil, it's easy to replace palm oil with forest oils. Chontaduro is like an agroforestry crop here. We're looking at babasu oil. You can, a lot of the palm oils for cosmetics, and the cosmetic oils are much better when they're naturally gathered from the jungle. And then with the new anti-deforestation law in the EU, it's going to change a lot of this cosmetic shipping. One of the big issues for all three of those supply chains is that TNFD did not require people to disclose their sub-companies or their supply chain adequately. So, you know, these cute little brands that are selling your fancy skin cream don't have to say where they got that oil from. And that's one of the big issues that we're targeting on a political level. So we have a group of Indigenous leaders who are friends that we work with. There's 60 leaders in 30 countries. And one of the things we're going after really hard is TNFD for disclosing sub-companies' activity.
Wow. The you mentioned there's 1 billion people living in these areas in the
Yeah.
Amazons.
Yeah.
So I knew I forgot what the number was, but do you want to help? Was that the 1 million? Yeah, that was the 1 billion. That's
1
why
billion, that's my peeps.
right,
They
right. Now
they
I
don't have
understand.
digital twins. They don't have bank accounts. They haven't been economically included before at all in the global scheme of things.
I read the 1 billion and I thought, so how will you do this?
Well, there's three weird emerging technologies right now that have changed everything in the last like 5-10 years. And there's like a sweet little intersection of the three. One is satellite monitoring, which is getting high res and can really help you just, you know, in a very like scalable way, tell you what these guys are actually doing. Because they're cute and adorable, and if they can like do something else, they will, because they're delinquent savants just like us. So the misbehavior is expected and not necessarily encouraged, but accounted for. And then the electronic banking. So most of them can get to fiat banking on a mobile internet right now. You've got Starlink, which has brought high-res internet into these areas, and then also WhatsApp. So strangely, they all seem to like and be connected on WhatsApp. So it's not exactly a social network, but I didn't see that 5 years ago. So when I need to get to an Indigenous leader anywhere in the world, he's going to be on WhatsApp, and they didn't used to be connected like that. And so now with all these technologies, kind of like this intersection of technology access. I mean, most humans use fire, and for whatever reason, most humans are using mobile phones, even if they're deep in the jungle. So you can actually do custom software. What they haven't had before is economics and technology just for them. Like they've been using economics and technology of the industrialized world, but what Savimbo wants to do and what we are doing is making economics that work for them. So more tangible, like they'd much rather have a bird in the hand than two birds on the book, you know, in the bush. So small micropayments are a much bigger incentive, and they'll work for much less if they're getting it tangibly in advance.
Okay. So how can we help you? How can companies, organizations help you?
Yeah, so Savimbo has a page called Friends. So if you don't need financial, there's all kinds of like weird little actions you can take. I would say that we're a little bit like a movement. Like we've crossed the line from like cute little company into like some weird symbol of like, oh my God, this actually could work. So and so that's one way you can help. We always need capital, and we're always happy to grow. I have 10 Indigenous groups beating down my door, riding on mopeds, demanding their video cameras. We want to start crediting biodiversity right now. So growth capital would be highly appreciated. You could buy anywhere credits on our website, and we have a small group of very committed consumer subscribers, and they give us $20 a month, and they subscribe to a small farmer, and they like, follow, and share everything we do. And like those guys are like my besties because they really are helping us prove this economic model. Like this can work. You can't have this handshake across space and time from these people who nobody knows who they are, and you know, they were previously trustless, but Savimbo's given them a face and a name and shown that they can be trustworthy. And so, yeah.
And I've noticed you have like, okay, you have 4 different kinds of credits. You've mentioned them before, but you also have like a gift.
Oh
So,
yeah, the planet gift. Yeah, everybody's always giving people shitty gifts. Like, sorry, I shouldn't say shitty, but you know, you get invited to a birthday party, you're like, oh my God, I didn't think of anything. And then you go out and buy some crappy piece of plastic so you don't show up with empty-handed. I was like, just if you don't know what to give the planet gift. Like, it's cute. So they get the package, like, I think they get a tree credit, a biodiversity credit, a water credit, and a 10-year carbon credit. And then they get like this happy, like, planet gift. Like, hey, I gave you a planet.
I'm thinking now back to what you just said. So you can give these farmers, um, let's say $15 worth of credit for a year. But how much money do you need to give these 1 billion people, um, let's say, a decent living?
It's horrifically low. Like the day wage, I was just specking out a new project. Their day wage for like a hard day of labor is $6. And by policy, we usually don't pay $100 of, like if they had a job logging or doing something disruptive, we will pay them 80% of what that would be when they start. And the reason is that helps us easily distinguish between people who are doing it for the right reasons. So if they take a pay cut to work on conservation, and then we usually creep the wage up over time. So they'll start lower than they would be getting for, and that we never overpay on the ground at the beginning. They can make more money later, but so we try and match the current behaviors and then get people to choose to switch for their own motivations. And that helps us decide who to work with. We have a lot of tips and tricks for like working on the ground because humans are human. Like, you know, they're not perfect just because they're living in a tropical forest, and deciding who you can trust in that setting is half of the battle.
Hmm.
This project worked because Johnny was my 2 partners were Johnny and Fernando. They were both very, very, very ethical when it came to distributing funds. They just didn't care about money, and they made sure everybody around them, whatever they got, they made sure everybody around them had. And then they were both like super ethical and super committed to conserving the forest. And they've been doing it for 20 years at an economic loss on their own. And so partnering with them, they're total outliers. Partnering with them brought all the right people, and it was a huge part of the project's success. So you can't just like show up with, you know, $100 and say, wave it around and be like, hey, I'm in the jungle. Anybody want to work for me? It doesn't work like that. You just start with the right people. And then once you start with the right people, you've created a social hierarchy with desirable social behaviors. And then your people want to be like those people. So you've incentivized positive social identities within the community. And it's really easy to get kids who are like, hey, I want to be like Johnny, follow him around. Johnny is obviously pretty cool. And the behavior change is viral and very effective. I hope that wasn't too much wandering.
No, no, and I think so, you meet these 2 people, outliers, and why did he accept you?
Oh yeah. Okay. Well, frankly, in the Amazon, they have an amazing way to test business partnerships. They give you a lot of ayahuasca, and if you are standing up and walking around and making a campfire after that, they're like, "Well, that person is sane, and now we will talk to them." So it's an amazingly effective way to determine how conscious somebody is. And I had done a lot of yoga, and I was ridiculously lucid on Yahe, and they were like, well, that person's sane. I guess she will be a good business partner, and now you will work for us. But more functionally, I would say most Indigenous groups tend to recruit somebody that I would describe as a cultural lawyer to help them vet business partners and business relationships that they don't necessarily understand. And it can be a child of the chief who goes to the city and trains and learns kind of like industrialized world culture, or it can sometimes be a trusted white person who like they decided, okay, that person's sane and they're ethical and we can trust them. And then that person is kind of deployed to go set business structures and help them arrange things because they need protection.
And you have like a number of projects and companies you're doing at the same time. Um, is this the most important one for you at the moment?
Yeah, it looks like I do, but I don't. These are my previous. I have committed. And I know my friends are like, you don't know how to do that, but I'm heart into Savimbo. I had a previous consulting company. I shut it down. Like it's been taking external consults with my other partners, but I'm not involved anymore. And yeah, Savimbo is the only thing that I'm doing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
I wanted a 10-year project and I think we're about 2 years in now and I see at least 10 years to get this kind of like a machine that's working on its own and doing what it was meant to do.
Right. Do you get like grants or large funding or
I
from
hope
governments?
I hope we have like 7 or 8 grants applications in now. So far we haven't gotten anything and I'm surprised because like I get calls all the time like from US State Department, UN, IIED, like World Bank. They're all like, hey, can we use your stuff? And I'm like, yes, because you get pay for it. The reason is nobody really knows what we do is very much from the bottom up. So it's like a collective intelligence from shaman who manage a lot of community drama in a totally different context. And so what we're doing is kind of automating that ability to manage people and pay them and everything into using technology. So it doesn't make sense to people at the beginning, but it works really well. Like our payment protocol was co-designed with a shaman here who are used to distributing resources fairly in indigenous communities. And the World Bank called me and was like, please apply for this grant. We want to use this.
Hmm. Hmm. How do you prove to them that you're doing the right things with the money?
I am a data fiend. I have I have shit tons of data about exactly where my money went, and it's even in a public dashboard. And I gave it to I did a small presentation to the small farmers about who got paid what when, and they were like, "We've never seen this before." Corrupt. We thought every business was so corrupt. I was like, "Nope, open data, man. It's one of the best tools we've got for who we work with. Buyers love it, the small farmers love it, everybody loves it." So yeah.
And how do you manage your time changing, not changing, balancing the work that you do with the on the ground and also trying to get funds or grants or talking to people? How do you do that?
There is no balance, as any high tech founder will tell you for the first couple of years. It's like having a new baby. The Google founders talked about their company a lot like a baby. They'd be like, our baby is 18, our baby is 12. You know, you see their press releases. It's like that. So the first 2 years of a company, it's just like a baby. Like it cries all the time and you have to stay up with it and there's no getting away from it and you're its parent and that's the way it is. And so you have to be a little bit of not only a workaholic, but if you weren't a workaholic, you wouldn't get a startup off the ground.
Right.
And I'm always been a seasonal worker. Like in fire, I would do 6 months full bore and then 6 months off. So that's kind of how it works for me. I'm very like periodic with the sprints. Yeah.
And what do you do when you have off? You go back to US? How do you do it? What do you do?
No, I stay here all the time. And part of the reason I'm successful is because in the Amazon, it's very calm. There's like, it's quiet. There's not a lot of distraction. There's no social events. I don't have to go to pitch events and talk to people. So it's a lot easier to focus and do high-end intellectual work. My partners and I had a problem with time at the beginning because they don't believe in time. So I'll be like, I have a calendar and let's plan something. And they'll be like, no, 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 we'll just do it when it's ready to be done. So indigenous people don't do time. I was just talking to somebody and they're like, when's dinner? And I'm like, don't even ask. Like dinner is when dinner is. It's either dinner or it's not dinner. And there's no, and so that was a big issue. So what we compromised on is I have a 1 week rolling calendar. I never schedule beyond 1 week out so they can, and then they occasionally I will just drop the whole day's worth of appointments if like an indigenous leader comes and they're like, now will be the day, and I'll be like, okay, and I'll call everybody, I'm so sorry, this is part of this company. And then I have a couple of days that are just off for the jungle.
Wow.
Yeah.
If you look back at how you were brought up and the way that you lived then, and how do you live now? Do you see similarities? Do you see how you live now that's compared to because I see there's a lot of difference in between all these things that you did, but to me, it looks like kind of like similar. Is that true?
Totally. Yeah. There was a period of time when I lived in like San Francisco and LA, and I've lived in huge cities and Europe and stuff. And I do like cities, but around 30, I started to just crave nature in a way that and I don't know if somebody who didn't grow up deeply in nature would feel the same way, but I felt like I was missing a vitamin, and I was like, I can't do it. I can't do it anymore. So, um, yeah, and the shaman are the same way. They'll tell you that they literally can't go to the city. They feel like they're gonna die because they're away from all this connection. So I think that at a certain point, if you do get deeply connected to nature, you can't live without it. Um, the nice thing though, because when I grew up off the grid, I was really, like I said, undesirable, very cute in a very rural area, and I was so bored. Like I was so desperate for mental stimulation and to work with people who could think with me and challenge me. And so the nice thing is now in this later incarnation of my life, because I spent that time in the city and I made the connections, I'm able to work at a very high level intellectually with the connection to nature. So I give the best of both worlds. I'm a minimalist and my needs are very low. I don't like fancy food, and I like simple living styles. So I don't know if other people would enjoy this life as much as I do, but
Yeah, and I saw that part in some of your conversations or interviews or whatever you had, that you're a minimalist, and that to me also read like you don't take a lot of money out of the company or don't earn a lot of money yourselves.
no. I don't need it. Like my money goes back into Savimbo. So yeah, because my cost of living here is very low, I can redistribute whatever salary I'd be taking. And that is a huge part of our success. I mean, if you look at the operating budget for most startups and how much the CEO has to take, like it's like 100K a year to live in San Francisco minimum. And that's like a poverty level. And so that's $100,000 you can put back in. And when you have a group of people that live on $6 a day, that goes a long ways. And they will work their hearts out for like, these are people who would be doing a labor job with a pickaxe. You give them a computer and they will knock it out of the ballpark. So the performance and the commitment and the quality and the excitement about the work that I get working with local staff, yeah.
To me, I have this question, which is about enough, right? So when do we have enough? I think that's something that you've got answered for yourself.
Yeah, but you know what I realized? This is why Johnny, Fernando, and I are such a good founding team. Every single one of us doesn't want anything more out of life. And we were that way when we started. Now, I'm not saying we have anything. Like I think all three of us were living out of a backpack. Like none of us owns no, I think Johnny and Fernando, they own homes, but like we're kind of in this collective living situation with where somebody gave us a house to have the business, and um all of us all of us founded the company to give back. And I realized about the first year of the company, some business partners worked, some didn't. And there was a huge difference. And the difference was anybody that joined the business because they had enough and they wanted to give back was successful at the business and happy working with us. People that joined the business because they wanted to take from the business, they wanted to be supported, they wanted to be wealthy or whatever, they didn't continue. So there's a clear dividing line. This feeling of enough really enables you to do amazing work.
I think this is going to be one of my final questions, but how, and I think it's an important question. I think it's important to get to know what your enough is, and you can see how driven and fulfilled you are with the work that you do. At least I think I can see that. And how can people find this? How can people find they stop craving more and be satisfied with what they have and put time in to do something to give back? How can you find this?
Wow, that's a tough question. I wrote a book about that, but I don't recommend anybody reads it. Well, you know. Um, but that's how I got to that point. And that's not something we talk about a lot. But Johnny and Fernando and I all had, you know, significant spiritual experiences to the point where we reached a level of quiet satisfaction with life that I think there's this there's this inner chaos that people feel, and I certainly felt it myself, so I know what it feels like, where you're like, it's just never going to be enough, and you're always running around chasing the next thing or the next high or the next achievement or the next love or the next, adrenaline high, then the next high. And people, once you become aware of that chase, and that the chase is truly endless, and that you've been engaged in it for, however many years or lifetimes or whatever, once you become aware of that, it shorts out and it goes away, and you stop chasing. You stop running away, you stop looking for something else, and you start, there's this moment, at least there was for me, where I was like, wow, I'm not seeking anymore. I found, like, I know I had this deep inner well of satisfaction, and it has nothing to do with like how much money I have or how sexy my body is or how nice I am, because I'm not always that nice. Yeah, that is a moment worth having, and it does. I think it takes time. I think you have to focus on it. You have to like realize the endless chase isn't working, and then actually go and look for that moment, and that is a separate search.
Do you also think that it has you have to have like a courage to do it because you become like you will lose a lot of friends, let's put it that way.
Yeah, totally. You you will lose everything. Like the story of Job in the Bible is the story that I like to tell. Like it's not going to be pretty, like because it's a death rebirth process for sure. And I certainly did. I lost everything that I thought I had, and then I got it all back. But I was desperate to find a real answer, and I just become aware, like, that whatever it was that I was engaged in wasn't taking care of that inner chaos, that inner like lack of meaning that I was still trying to fill. So I became really, really obsessed with, I have to fix this. And I'm so glad I did, because I did fix it. But people are terrified that if they confront the inner core of what they are, they're going to find a horrible, dark, ugly, demon thing, or if they confront the core of the universe, and like they're going to find like a huge black hole, endless nothing forever. And that's not what I found. Everybody is going to have their own journey, but that's not what I found when I looked. But it took a lot of courage to go look there.
I saw the short video of you saying what are the 5 tips or advice that would give you your younger self. That was interesting too, because you know, describing the dark periods that you were going through, that's just um yeah, it's a difficult phase. And when I looked at that video, I would see how difficult time you went through. And you're trying to give your younger self advice of how you could conquer that, or how you could, at least see that there's something better coming, right? You have to go through this phase. So I can understand that, that was a very difficult phase for you. Um, uh, but, again, you have now this beautiful place where you're at, and this company and this drive and these goals that you have to help these 1 billion people, and doing that, also helping the world and changing the way that we think about it. And so to me, it's I saw what you were doing on LinkedIn. I go like, oh my gosh, that's an interesting story. I want to learn more about that, what she's doing and how we can help this. And I think I want to share stories like this because I feel there should be more stories like this, and so that we can create the better future, right? If we look for the inner core of things, that we can find the better things, and we can work together and to create a different future than what the Western world is showing us that we need to follow. No, we have different options there, I believe.
I think that, look at how many people watch zombie apocalypse movies in the US. There's a very big collective subconscious that like the future is going to be awful, and and I don't believe in that. There was a man, Charles Dabrowski, who studied giftedness during World War II, and he was in Poland during Nazi occupation, and he was working with gifted kids who were autistic sometimes. and he was trying to save their lives because at the time they were euthanizing children that were disabled. And so he ended up doing a lot of research on giftedness and what it looks like, and how it can sometimes look like a pathology, but that it's worth keeping around. And so he wrote passionate research studies and really beautiful work on behalf of these, and he managed to save like an entire like home full of gifted kids, and autistic kids. And he did a bunch of research on positive disintegration. And it's the concept that like we might have the wrong model for what a fully realized human looks like. And his argument was that we don't linearly improve. We improve like a phoenix. We burn ourselves to ashes and then we rise out of the ashes. It's a death rebirth cycle for human development. And yeah, my childhood was brutal, and my early 20s were brutal, and my 30s were brutal. And I have been through all these like death rebirth cycles in my life, and I'm okay with it now. So I'm not saying I won't have another one. I'm just saying that I'm okay with the pattern, because yeah, what I have been able to have out of life is partly because I was able to let things die that weren't working for me.
Wow.
And we can do that as a planet.
That's an interesting. Oh, that last one. That's an interesting ad. How do you see then? Does it mean that all species will die in the world and we rise again from
No,
that?
I think we need to let bad. So if you do a death reverse cycle on a psychedelic, you're just fine. You don't physically die, but you have the experience of death, and parts of you, your attachment to stupid things dies. It dies, and you feel it die and go. And we are attached to colonialism and extraction, and those need to die. Those things need to die. Our planet will go on. We'll be happy. We'll be healthy. But we can let these toxic ideas die out of our psyche, out of our collective psyche, and we'll be okay.
Ah, that's that's so powerful. Drea, that is so powerful. I didn't know that this is going to be the ending of this conversation, but this is so powerful. I I I've never seen this. I've never heard this idea before. I've never seen it also in my own mind. Now this I see this now. Beautiful.
Yeah.
Okay, is there something that you want to add, something you want to tell, share?
No, this was so much fun. We covered it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe one thing, Indigenous people are really cool. Like they have 6% of the population. They have 80% of the biodiversity and 30% of the intact planets. And they have radically different paradigms than the colonized world. And it takes a while to kind of figure out the paradigms. And once you get them, the paradigms are pretty universal. And I think that they present probably the biggest hope. There's this false belief that they are retroactive, living in the cavemen out in the woods chewing on bones. And the reality is that they're not. They live in harmony with nature. And they can be very, very, very intelligent. And so I do think, I'm not Indigenous romanticism, but there's like DNA and information there that we could really access in order to kind of balance this new life. And that's what I'm excited about. Yeah.
Thank you. Drea,
Right.
it was wonderful to talk to you. Thank you, Drea.
Okay.
It was wonderful to get to know you.
So much fun. Yeah. Can we share? We're connected on LinkedIn, right?
Yes, we are.
Great questions. This was a ton of fun.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Bye.
Talk to you later. Bye.